Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, sometimes a single word can just contain an entire universe of intellectual conflict. Today, we are wrestling with one of those. A single, highly charged Arabic word, alaq.
Oh, yeah.
And well, how you translate it basically determines whether you see an ancient scripture holding some kind of profound, predictive, scientific insight.
Or just reflecting the best medical knowledge available back in the 7th century.
Exactly. It's a huge fork in the road.
It really is. And our deep dive today, it's focusing right on the source material around Quran 96, verses 1 and 2.
Which tell us that man was created from this substance, from alaq.
And the whole tension, the whole debate, it really hinges on the fact that this word has always had sort of a dual meaning historically.
Right. Two quite different interpretations. It can mean a clinging or leech-like substance.
Or it can mean a clot of blood.
And that duality. That's pretty much the foundation for everything we're going to talk about today.
So maybe let's start with the most intuitive meaning, the historical one.
Okay. So picture yourself in 7th century Arabia. No microscopes, obviously.
Right. What's the most accessible meaning? What would people likely understand?
It would have to be the clot of blood, wouldn't it?
Almost certainly. And that wasn't just, a random guess.
No, it was based on observation, right? Like early miscarriages.
Precisely. If a pregnancy ended very early, what you might see was often described as a small, blood-like mass, a coagulum.
So something observable, even if the biology behind it was a total mystery.
Exactly. But what's really fascinating, and the sources point to this, is that this idea wasn't, unique to Arabia.
Ah, okay. So where else was this idea floating around?
Well, it seems pretty clear it was filtered through the kind of dominant scientific thinking of the wider region. We're talking Greco-Roman legacy here.
You mean Galen, the Greek physician?
That's the one. Centuries earlier, around the 2nd century CE, he was theorizing that the embryo formed when semen acted on menstrual blood.
And that resulted in a clot,
Yep.
essentially, yeah. A blood-like substance, as he put it. So the idea of a clot stage was basically the standard medical understanding across the Mediterranean and the Middle East.
It was the default setting for that era.
And we see this interpretation pop up again when you look at the full sequence of development described elsewhere in the Quran, like in Surah 23.
Right, that sequence is important. It lays out steps, doesn't it?
It does. It describes this progression, nutfa, that's like a drop of fluid,
Okay,
which becomes the alaq, or clinging clot.
got it.
Then it moves to mudda, which is usually translated as a chewed lump of flesh.
Okay, like it has teeth marks or something.
Sort of, yeah. And this part's really critical for later bones are formed.
Bones first.
And then finally, the bones are covered with flesh. That's the sequence described.
Okay, so that's the picture based on the, let's say, best science of the 7th century, heavily influenced by Galen.
Exactly.
Now,
Yeah.
let's bring in modern embryology, which, really took off with microscopes in the 19th century.
Right, big shift. So if we stick with that historical clot translation, where does the conflict actually lie?
Well, the conflict is kind of twofold, actually. First, as you said, modern science talks about the zygote, then the morula, like a solid ball of cells, then the blastocyst, which is this fluid-filled sphere that implants in the uterus.
Okay, no clots there.
0 clots.
Okay.
There is simply no stage where the early embryo is literally a clot of blood. It's a rapidly dividing mass of cells, not coagulated blood.
That's a pretty direct contradiction. That's the first hit.
Right.
But you mentioned that sequence from Surah 23, the bit about bones forming first, then flesh covering them.
Yes, and that's the second and arguably just a serious scientific challenge to that traditional interpretation.
How so?
Modern embryology is very clear on this. The skeleton bone and cartilage and the muscle, the flesh, they both develop concurrently.
Ah, so not sequentially, like bones first, then muscle.
No, not at all. They both start developing from the same embryonic layer, the mesoderm, around the same time. They differentiate together.
So the idea of fully formed bones getting covered later by flesh, that sequence just doesn't match what we observe happens.
Correct. It's inconsistent with the known timing of how human embryos develop.
Wow. It's amazing how persistent that Galenic idea was, and how, under a modern microscope, it creates these two pretty specific problems for the traditional reading.
Definitely.
So if the classical clot meaning and that bone-flesh sequence derived from it kind of fail the microscopic test, what happened next? How did scholars defend the text's divine origin.
Well, this is where things get really interesting linguistically. It involves a major pivot.
Away from the clot.
Entirely away from the clot, meaning instead the focus shifts dramatically to the other classical meaning of alaq.
Which was the clinging thing, or leech-like structure.
Exactly those. For the modern sort of faith-based interpretation, the clot translation wasn't just inaccurate, it was seen as a human error.
Influenced by the science of the time, by Galen.
Precisely. The argument becomes that the true scientifically accurate meaning clinging thing, or leech, was actually there all along, hidden in plain sight within the word's semantic range.
Okay, but before we dive into how that leech idea gets validated scientifically, we should probably talk about the people who drove this whole approach, right? This ijaz ilmi.
Absolutely. The scientific miracles movement, you really have to mention figures like Dr. Maurice Bucaille.
The French physician from the 70s.
That's him. Bucaille really pioneered this whole argument that religious texts, specifically the Quran, should be judged against modern science.
And he found.
He famously argued that the Quran was uniquely free of the scientific errors and cosmological myths he saw in other ancient texts.
So his method was basically, if science contradicts a traditional reading, we need to re-examine the language.
Essentially, yes. Reinterpret the Arabic linguistically until you find a meaning that does align with modern science.
So Bucaille sort of sets the stage, arguing for this linguistic reevaluation. But hang on a second. Did people in the 7th century, or even medieval commentators, ever really emphasize this leech-like meaning? Or is this focus something that only really emerges after the 19th century scientific challenges became clear? Isn't that just a convenient post hoc rationalization, finding a meaning that fits after the fact?
That is precisely the core criticism from historians and skeptics. They argue exactly that the intense focus on leech is a modern necessity, driven by the need to resolve the conflict.
Makes sense.
However, proponents of the modern view push back. They'd say the potential meanings of the word are timeless. It's just that our scientific understanding had to catch up to appreciate the most accurate meaning.
Okay, let's unpack that leech analogy then, because it's very striking. How does that work?
Proponents make two main points. First, the clinging aspect.
Right.
The blastocyst stage, around day 6 to 10 after fertilization, it literally implants or clings to the wall of the uterus, the endometrium.
Okay, so clinging thing fits that implantation stage. What about the leech part?
That refers more to the appearance and function a bit later, maybe around the 4th week.
How so?
Well, visually, the early embryo has this distinct C shape. It doesn't have obvious limbs yet, and it's suspended in the gestational sac.
Okay.
And crucially, functionally, just like a leech, its entire purpose at this stage is to draw nourishment, oxygen, nutrients directly from the mother's blood supply via the developing placenta.
So it clings and draws sustenance like a leech does, both shape and function.
That's the argument. It's leech-like, both visually to some extent and functionally.
That is a powerful image. And the thing that gave this interpretation huge credibility, especially globally, was getting validation from outside the faith, wasn't it? Dr. Keith L. Moore.
Yes, Dr. Moore. He was and is a prominent Canadian embryologist, author of a major medical textbook, The Developing Human, and he's not Muslim.
Right. And he was asked to look at these verses.
Yeah.
In the 80s.
He was. And his public statements were frankly monumental for this movement. He said that the description, when interpreted as the clinging thing, was remarkably consistent with modern embryological findings.
He actually said he was astonished that this knowledge could have been known in the 7th century.
He did express astonishment, and he was apparently so convinced that he co-authored a special edition of his textbook, The Developing Human, with Islamic additions.
Wow. Okay. Having a non-Muslim author of a standard embryology textbook basically sign off on this interpretation is massive.
It's huge leverage for the modern faith-based view. It provided exactly the kind of external scientific validation that Bucaille's approach needed to gain widespread traction.
Yeah, you can see why.
Absolutely. For those who hold this view, discovering this scientifically accurate meaning and having it validated by modern science is seen as clear proof that the text must transcend its historical context, that it must be divine.
So, stepping back for a moment, how does this level of detailed anatomical description compare to what we find in other major religious traditions? Does looking at them help clarify the Quran's goal here?
I think it does help put it in perspective. If you look at Judaism, for example, the Talmud discusses embryo formation, sure.
But how?
The language tends to be more maybe poetic or focused on certain time frames like the first 40 days, where the embryo is sometimes referred to as mere water.
Not quite biological stages then.
Less so. Or you have Psalm 139 saying we are knit together in the womb. The focus is very much on God's agency, the miracle of it, the timing of when the soul enters, not really on laying out precise biological mechanics.
Okay. And what about other traditions, say Hinduism?
Well, interestingly, in the Hindu tradition, you have texts like the Garbha Upanishad, and that does lay out sequential stages.
Really? Like the Quran sequence?
Structurally similar, yes.
Yeah.
Talks about Kalala becoming a bud, like a bubble, then progressing to flesh, bones, and so on.
So the basic idea of describing development in stages isn't unique to the Quran.
Not at all. And what's interesting is that these sequences, whether in the Talmud, the Upanishads, or even that traditional interpretation of the Quranic sequence, they often reflect similar observational points or maybe philosophical timelines, like that 40-day mark often being significant.
Okay, so the key difference seems to be less about whether stages are mentioned and more about the level of detail and whether it's intended as, say, poetic guidance versus something perceived as a biological description.
I think that's a fair way to put it.
Yeah.
The common thread across these traditions seems theological, not biological. Meaning the focus is on the wonder of creation itself, our dependence on a creator, the mystery of life beginning, maybe the journey towards ensoulment. The specific mechanism described seems secondary to that core message.
Right, which brings us back to the central clash we've been discussing, the historical clot versus the scientifically aligned leech. It really feels like the correct answer depends entirely on the lens you choose to look through.
It absolutely does. And we can probably synthesize all this material into maybe 3 fundamental ways of looking at it. 3 distinct interpretations.
Okay, let's call them the 3 definitive interpretations. Lens number 1.
Lens 1, the scientific or historical view.
Right. What's the core idea here?
This view argues that the Quran, like any text revealed in a specific time and place, naturally used the knowledge and language that was accessible and resonant then. In this case, 7th century Arabia.
So the prevalent Galenic ideas about the clot and the bone-flesh sequence.
Exactly. It used that framework to communicate its deeper theological message. From this perspective, the fact that the clot idea or the sequence isn't accurate by modern standards is, well, it's kind of irrelevant.
Why relevant?
Because the text's primary goal wasn't to be a biology textbook, it was spiritual guidance hidayah. So the modern leech interpretation, while maybe linguistically possible, is seen as an elegant but ultimately unnecessary post hoc attempt to make the text fit modern science.
Trying to make it something it wasn't originally intended to be. Okay. Lens number 2.
Lens 2, the modern faith-based view. This is the Ijaz Ilmi perspective we discussed.
Championed by Bukai, validated by Moore.
Precisely. Here the text is seen as perfect, divinely authored, and therefore transcending time and human scientific understanding.
So the clot translation was simply a mistake.
A human error in interpretation, yes, influenced by the flawed science of the past. The true, scientifically accurate meaning, the clinging thing or leech, was always there, embedded in the Arabic, just waiting for modern science to catch up and reveal it.
And the alignment with embryology, especially with Moore's endorsement, is taken as proof.
Undeniable proof for adherents of this view. Proof of the Quran's divine origin and its miraculous scientific foresight.
Okay. And lens number 3, you call it the contextual faith view. This sounds slightly different again.
It is. This view also affirms the text as divine revelation, but it questions the premise that its divinity lies in containing hidden scientific facts.
How?
For this group, the Quran's primary purpose is hidayah guidance. It's not a lab manual, so whether alaq literally meant a clot or a leech to the very first audience, that's actually secondary.
Secondary to what?
Secondary to the theological impact the word choice had. The text used analogies and language that were accessible and powerful than to deliver timeless messages.
Like what message?
Primarily 2, in this case. First, to instill humility, reminding human beings of their very humble, almost visceral origins. You start as this thing.
Right. Whether clot or clinging thing, it's not exactly glamorous.
Not at all. And second, to emphasize God's immense creative power. Look how something so intricate and complex arises from something seemingly so simple, this alaq.
But hang on, if the precise biological mechanism doesn't matter for this view, why include the description at all? Couldn't the text just say, God created man from dust or something simpler? Why the anatomical nod, even if metaphorical?
That's a great question. The detail, even if using the language of the time, serves a purpose. It's not just that God creates, but how the process itself becomes a sign.
So using the familiar, like the idea of a clot or something clinging, makes the miracle more tangible, more awe-inspiring.
Exactly. It takes something people might have observed or conceptualized,
Yeah.
based on Galen perhaps, and elevates it, frames it as an act of divine artistry. It uses the available 7th century concepts, whether or not they hold up perfectly under a 21st century microscope.
Okay, that synthesis is really helpful. It feels like whichever lens you choose, historical, modern faith, or contextual faith, the verse's enduring power seems to land in the same place, inspiring awe at creation.
I think that's right. The theological punchline remains potent regardless of the biological interpretation you favor.
But what's really fascinating here, the thing that sticks with me, is that the real debate isn't really about embryology, is it? It's not clot versus leech.
No, I don't think it is ultimately.
It's about the very nature of revelation itself.
Exactly. It pushes you, the listener, to confront a really fundamental question about how you read ancient sacred texts.
Are you searching for encoded modern scientific facts hidden within the words? Evidence that the text somehow steps outside of time?
Or do you read it as a text that speaks perfectly to its own time, using the science, the metaphors, the language that was culturally potent and resonant then, binding it firmly to its historical moment while still carrying timeless spiritual truths?
That is the big question to chew on, isn't it? When you engage with these powerful texts, where should your priority lie? Uncovering the supposed scientific mechanism or grasping the enduring spiritual mandate?
It's a crucial distinction. The science might change, our understanding of biology will certainly continue to evolve.
But that call to humility, to wonder at the sheer mystery of existence, that seems absolutely timeless.